There are certain objects that seem to carry more than their physical form. Not because of what they are, but because of what we believe they hold. The Annabelle doll is one of the most well-known haunted objects in the world. But the real version is nothing like the films. It's a simple Raggedy Ann doll, fabric soft and ordinary. And yet, it became the centre of something far more unsettling. Reports of movement, notes appearing without explanation, a presence that didn't feel like it belonged to the object at all. According to Ed and Lorraine Warren, this wasn't a spirit. It was something pretending to be one. Something that wasn't attached to the doll, but using it. And that idea changes everything. Because if an object can be used, what does it mean for the space around it? Soon, I'll be standing in front of the real Annabelle, and I'll be honest, I don't know how I feel. Not because I know it's dangerous, but because of everything that surrounds it. The story, the belief, the weight of what people think it is. So the question isn't just is it haunted, but what does it mean to believe it might be? You're listening to the Beyond Haunted UK podcast. My name is Jamie, and this is a warning that this episode may contain sensitive themes, so please listen with care. There are certain objects that seem to carry more than their physical form. Not because of what they are, but because of what we believe they hold. A photograph kept long after someone has gone, a piece of jewellery passed through generations, or even a chair that no one chooses to sit in anymore. Now on their own, they are just objects. But over time, meaning builds, emotion lingers, and sometimes something else is said to remain. Now few objects represent that idea more clearly than the Annabelle doll, and not the version that you've probably seen in films. Not the porcelain face, the sharp features, or the exaggerated design created for effect. The real Annabelle is something far more ordinary. She's a Raggedy Ann doll, which is made of fabric, which is soft and light. And it's really the kind of thing you would expect to find in a child's bedroom. It's something familiar, something safe. And maybe that's what makes the story more unsettling. Because nothing about it looks threatening. And yet, it has become one of the most well-known haunted objects in the world. The story begins in the late 1960s. A student nurse, Donna, was given the doll as a gift. It was placed in her apartment. At first, nothing stood out. It was just there. But gradually, small things began to change. The doll would be left in one position, and later found in another. Arms repositioned, legs crossed, placed on a bed, and then found sitting upright in a chair. At first it was dismissed. Memory plays tricks and people do forget. You naturally assume someone else moved it because you want to rationalise it. But the movements became more deliberate, more noticeable and harder to explain. And then came the notes. Messages that reportedly appeared on parchment paper, which was something that just didn't exist in the apartment. The writing was simple, childlike. It simply said, "Help me." And at that point the situation shifted. Because it moved beyond movement into communication. A medium was eventually brought in, and the explanation that followed would define the story that we know today. The doll, it was said, was inhabited by the spirit of a young girl, a child named Annabelle Higgins. A presence that had once lived on the land. A presence that was lost and wanted to stay. At first it didn't feel threatening, it felt sad. Something to be understood, something to be accepted. And this is where something important happens. Because the moment you accept that explanation, you begin to interact with it differently. You stop seeing an object and start seeing something else. Something with intention. Something with awareness. And belief begins to shape experience. Now, according to Ed and Lorraine Warren, this explanation was wrong. They claimed the presence was not of a child, not of a lost spirit, but something else entirely. Something was using the idea of a child to gain trust. Now, they described it as inhuman, manipulative, and something that attaches itself not to objects, but to people. And that's where this story becomes a little darker. Because the object itself is no longer the focus. It becomes a tool, a point of contact, and even a way in. Now, the Warrens took the doll and removed it from the apartment and placed it inside a glass case. A warning was attached not to touch and not to provoke. And over time, stories followed. Visitors who mocked the doll, laughed at it, dismissed it, and later reported accidents, misfortune, unexplained experiences. Now, one of the most well-known accounts describes a man who tapped on the glass to challenge the object. Later that same day, he was involved in a fatal motorcycle accident. Now, whether this is coincidence or something more depends entirely on how you interpret it. And that's where this conversation becomes more complex. Because throughout history, objects have always carried meaning. Religious artifacts are believed to hold protection. Certain items are said to carry curses. Others are kept for comfort, as if they still hold a connection to someone who is no longer there. We as humans assign energy to objects. We project emotion onto them, and over time, those associations become powerful. So the question is not just, can an object be haunted? But what does it mean for something to feel that way? Because when someone stands in front of the Annabelle doll, they are not just seeing an object. They are standing in front of decades of story, fear, expectation, and even reputation. And the human mind responds to that. It anticipates, it fills the gaps. It wants to create meaning. And in environments like that, those reactions can feel completely real. So is the experience coming from the object, or from the person observing it? Or is it something in between? Because belief and environment are deeply connected. A quiet room feels different at night than it does in the daylight. A familiar space can feel unfamiliar under the right conditions. And when you introduce a story like Annabelle, that effect becomes amplified. Soon, I'll be standing in front of that same object at Pennhurst Asylum. And I'll be honest, there's a part of me that feels uneasy about it. And not because I know it's dangerous, but because of everything that surrounds it. You've got the history, you've got the stories, and even the reputation that it carries. And maybe that's where the real question sits. Not whether it is truly haunted, but what it feels like to stand in front of something believed to be, because that feeling alone can be powerful. It can stay with you. It can shape how you remember the experience. And maybe that's what these objects really represent. Not proof of something beyond us, but a reflection of how we process the unknown. I don't know if objects can hold negative energy. I don't know if something can attach itself to something physical. But I do know this. Stories change the way we see things. Belief changes the way we feel things. And sometimes that's enough to make something feel real. Now before you go, don't forget to follow Beyond Haunted UK across social media. Every follow, every share and every message helps the community grow and keeps these stories alive. We have just hit 1,000 streams, and I couldn't be more happier, and thank you from the bottom of my heart. Please continue to like, follow, share. You'll find us wherever the strange and the spiritual meet. Thank you for listening.